What's up, everybody? We are Throwing a Leather podcast. I am Justin.
I'm Corey.
And we are very honored today to welcome a special guest on the podcast, the one and only Mr. Mike Goldberg.
Okay, first of all, Justin, you can go Mike, you can go Goldie, even Mike Goldberg's fine, Corey, but Mr., I know our ages aren't virtually identical, but don't make me feel that old, brother. Don't make me feel that old. But thank you, man.
You're welcome. Is Mike good?
Yeah, Mike is perfect. How are you guys?
I'm doing great. Doing great. How are you?
You know what? Things are getting better. The end of last year was shoulder surgery, major reconstruction of my rotator cuff on the left side. Now I'm all good. Well, there's a little hitch still, but it's getting there. I had surgery on both of my eyes. They were called vitrectomy, not to be confused with the surgery I had after my son was born many years ago. I had vitrectomies, but now I'm healed. I'm ready to go. Got some boxing events coming up. I got some bare knuckle boxing ahead. It's going to be a fun 2022. It's going to be a good time.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Glad you're doing better. And
thank you.
Going good.
I was falling apart. I turned 57 in November, and an old buddy of mine, Tommy Wingles, went to Miami of Ohio many years after I did. But he was a San Jose Shark for a while, and my favorite hockey team are the Sharks. So I said to my son, I go, Goldie, I didn't know turning Tommy Wingles was going to be this much work, but it's getting better. It's getting better.
That's good. Glad to hear that.
Perfect. Yeah, we just we have some questions. Basically, you brought up the bare knuckle fighting.
Yeah.
My question was, do you think that's going to be the next evolution in combat sports?
I really do, Corey. And the reason I say that is, first and foremost, Justin and Corey, as you guys know, throwing the leather, they're still throwing.
Yep.
It's just if there's any leather, it's just a little bit of tape with a little bit of leather on the knuckles. Bare knuckle boxing is the oldest form of combat sports.
Yeah.
I mean, it dates back, a couple hundred years. It is the new big thing because as much as I have enjoyed and will continue to enjoy the sport of mixed martial arts, and as much as you and I and many others have embraced the ground game and understand the entire spectrum of what happens in mixed martial arts, there's still a little silencing of the crowd when the grappling starts, when the ground game works, until the ground and pound. And what happens when they stand them up? Place goes freaking crazy.
Yep.
So as much as I appreciate the entire skill set, and I've been blessed to make my name in the sport of mixed martial arts, people want to see stand up, bang, kind of like we saw the other night. I mean, those guys in the co-main event the other night reminded me of Gilbert Melendez, Diego Sanchez. Just bite down on the mouthpiece and throw. And that's what we have with bare knuckle. We have people going in with skills, but looking for finishes. And I get to say it is all over just like that, pretty much every fight. And I'm with BYB Extreme, and we have the 22 by 22 by 22 Trigon. Yeah, so I also get to say for my partner, Paulie Molinaggi, this is Mike Goldberg saying so long until next time. We see you right back here inside the Trigon.
I love it. So that kind of leads me to my next question is, with the co-main event the other night, did you think that the judges got the decision right?
Yes. Here's what I will tell you. Yes and no. Those type of fights are tough to judge. And the thing about MMA is you will always have, regardless of how much it has evolved, you will always have a striker mentality with one judge, a grappler mentality with another judge. And so their heart will be warmed by different things. And there's three very different angles. I used to tell Big John all the time that when he put his big old butt in front of the screen of those black pants, it was like an eclipse. I mean, Anthony Giordano would change cameras and John would move over. And he'd say, well, that's because I was in the right spot, Goldie. I go, well, you were in the wrong spot for millions of people. So get the fuck out of the way. And we would laugh about it. It's hard to tell. And I've not been one, unless it's really lopsided, to go, I don't know what the judges are thinking. I will tell you this, back in the, not early days, kind of the mid days, Joe would really talk about the officiating and talk about, I think that round went this way and that way. And more often than not, Joe was right. But oftentimes the judges were way off of what Joe said. And it got to the point where we kind of backed off and Joe kind of silenced himself, at least on the judging, because all it did was put a bigger spotlight on how much the judging of MMA fights needed to evolve. So it made it look worse because there was such a difference between what Joe Rogan was seeing and what the judges were seeing. So, hey, the way I look at it, roll it back again. That was a spectacular fight. Just keep on keeping on. Keep on keeping on. And the fact that it went to the judges may be the best story of them all. Maybe the best part of it all.
For sure. For sure.
So my daughter texts me. She's like, Dad, you still watch the fights? And I'm like, of course. She goes, you just watch that? That was crazy. I go, you mean the little guys? Okay. Now let me put this in perspective, Justin, Corey. Kira's like, Dad, little guys. I'm like, okay, I say that because the main event are two heavyweight beasts. I'm not saying they're little guys. Like, they're the littler guys compared to the big heavyweights that are about to enter. But my daughter's reaction was pretty funny when I told her the little guys.
Yeah, I mean, they do seem a little smaller in the cage, but
Yeah. And so did Rogan standing next to Nagano. Yeah. And obviously there was the scene from the fighter interviews I just saw with DC talking to Francis. And that's, I don't know why DC doesn't want to be touched in the face, but other than that, it's like DC's here, Francis is here, and Zach Candido, my old boss, the coordinating producer, is like, yeah, remember when you used to fight in the same weight class, DC? Yeah. And we're like, wow. I mean, that man is an absolute beast.
Yeah,
he's crazy.
Yeah.
That what are your thoughts on him boxing? Do you think he would be competitive?
Here's the deal. Yes, because he has a striker first mentality. When you give me Ben Askren, and this is not a criticism, but you give me Ben Askren or you give me Tyron Woodley. Okay, first of all, none of the three of us represented the United States of America in the Olympic Games. Ben Askren did. So let's just leave it right there. Okay, he's an Olympian. But his entire life has been ground, then trying to evolve with the other skill set. Ben didn't evolve and hasn't evolved as much as some others have. Tyron Woodley, little bit different. Tyron had more power, maybe a bit more athleticism. He wasn't an Olympic wrestler, but at the same time, he was a wrestler his entire life. Now, take me to the other end of the spectrum. Give me Anderson Silva, Curitiba, shoot the box. Started with the hands. Everything was the hands. Everything was the hands. And then the knees, and then the elbows, then the kicks. And, oh, by the way, he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Exactly.
Add Vitor Belfort to that. I know Evander wasn't really the guy we wanted to see him box against, but give me those hands to start with. Give me Chris Cyborg. And those transitions could be made, or you could argue that those transitions would be made more easily. One of Ronda Rousey's setbacks was that she was starting to get so good with her hands, and we saw the video that she went away from what got her to the top.
Right.
And then eventually she met someone who did start as a striker in Holly Holm. So to answer your question, yes, I think Francis can go in there and be competitive. Can he beat the top heavyweights in the world right now? No, no way. And my broadcast partner on a number of boxing ventures that I'm doing in 2022 is Paulie Malignaggi. And Paulie's opinion is, and I tend to agree with it, it is, neither transition is easy, Justin and Corey, but it is an easier transition to go from MMA to boxing. Right. Because there has been an element of striking in your training for many years. But from boxing to MMA, there's so much going on underneath those arms, starting with just your stance and the threat of the takedown, that is much more difficult. So I know it's a bit of a longer answer, but I hope you get where I'm coming from.
Definitely.
It makes more sense. You know, Johnny Hendricks is a great example. Johnny Hendricks had a bomb of a left hand, but he never outboxed anybody. He never out Muay Thai'd somebody. He often did the Chuck Liddell, little sprawl and brawl, and then you had to eat that. But he didn't set it up, jab, 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 and then, you know, he didn't naturally set it up as a boxer, as we have seen with other people. The Diaz brothers, for example, much more pure boxing skills to go with their other skills. So, yeah, I think Francis would be a great guy to see if he could handle it. He would take it very seriously. He's at peak conditioning, obviously. And if you get hit by him, I don't care if they're 40-ounce gloves, you're going to sleep.
Night-night.
Yeah.
Night-night, yeah.
So that, you know, also that throws it back to guys like James Toney back in the day who went from boxing to MMA. So it makes that look even better than it already did, because like you said, it's much more difficult than going from MMA to boxing.
It was funny. Randy Couture said later, he goes, Goldie, I don't want to be that guy. And you guys both know Randy's never been that guy. He goes, but that was the easiest ankle pick of my life. I mean, and again, I don't fault James because he wants to stand, and I don't fault Randy. I would crawl towards James Toney as well, because I'm watching all those highlights, getting ready to call that fight, you guys. And I'm like, holy crap, if Randy gets hit, damn, that dude still has a ton of power. But it wasn't there. It wasn't even close to being there. And then let's go the opposite way. Matt Mitrione, a great athlete. Is he a striker? Is he a wrestler? What is he? He's a football player who's a great athlete who can fight and can utilize that long range and beat people because of that.
Right.
He's facing Ryan Bader in the Bellator light heavyweight world Grand Prix. And Matt is telling us all how much he has been working on his wrestling. Ryan Bader, not one of those guys to be that guy, said, I love Matt. I respect him as an opponent, but I've been doing everything that he's trying to do since I was 4 years old.
Yeah.
He's not going to learn anything in 4 months that's going to trick me from a wrestling perspective. And that's truly how it is. It's truly how it is. Chris Letang of the Pittsburgh Penguins years ago was really funny. I'm at a Coyotes game, and I've always been tight with the hockey players. I'm a hockey player. My boy Jumbo up there, always a shark. Goldie, I got a question for you. We got the bet going on in the locker room. I'm like, okay, all right, talk to me. He goes, me, I fight Ronda Rousey. What happened? I go, Tanger, she takes you, she flips you, and she breaks your arm. Bullshit, Goldie, you're full of shit. I'm 200 pounds. Boom, I punch her. I go, hey, Tanger, I'm not saying that you're not bigger, stronger, but she's a judoka and it's leverage. It's not about weight and all that. And like, she's a toss you and beat you. Sidney Crosby, of all people, walks out. What did Goldie say? I told you there was a bet in the locker room. So Rick Tocchet, one of my favorite players ever, former Flyer, always a Flyer, not a Penguin in my heart. Tock was an assistant in Pittsburgh. He walks out. He goes, what the fuck you guys talking about? Ronda Rousey. He goes, Goldie, I will knock her out with one punch. I will knock her out, and I will bet you every single dime that you have. And I said, Tock, I'm going through a pretty tough divorce right now. I don't really have a lot of dimes available. And Rick Tocchet goes to me, I'm going through the same thing, Goldie, so we'll just make it a gentleman's bet. So there it is.
Got one number?
Hey, go ahead.
Speaking like boxing versus MMA, we saw the James Toney, Randy Couture fight. You know, we see guys coming in all the time wanting to go back and forth. You know, you hear rumors of this guy going to box or this guy. What would be your dream matchup to call? Boxing, MMA, both?
Wow. Yeah. Well,
in the
what would be my dream matchup? Well, at this point, one of the things that would really excite me would be to be part of an Oscar De La Hoya fight. If Oscar does fight again, let's take away the age and all that. Just I'm talking, Corey, being nostalgic.
Yeah.
And so how about Oscar De La Hoya, Anderson Silva? I know he was set for Vitor, but okay. How about that? I would love that. If Manny Pacquiao fights again, I want to call Manny Pacquiao because I absolutely love the guy. So from a boxing perspective, Anderson Silva is my guy, and he's looked great the 2 times he's boxed and destroyed Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Now, Dad was pretty pissed off at both his boys because he didn't feel they trained as hard as they should have. But the matter of the fact is that Anderson outboxed him, plain and simple. And when he started doing the spider with boxing gloves on, I was like, oh shit. Bam, bam, bam. So something with Anderson would still excite me. Nostalgically, something with De La Hoya or Pacquiao. And then if you want to take me to the modern days, I absolutely love watching Canelo box.
Yep.
Absolutely love watching Canelo. And he's just the whole package of class and the story and everything. So give me a Canelo fight against anybody, and it would be, comparable to those big UFCs that I was very blessed to call over the years. So those type of matchups would be very special ones. And one more that I just thought of that I've been calling for, but I don't know if we'll see it. Chris Cyborg, Amanda Nunes too.
Oh, yeah.
That's the one I want. And if that happens, I want to call that fight because I take nothing away from Amanda. There is no such thing as a lucky punch. There is a fortunate landing. People get caught. But please don't tell me that Connor kicked the shit out of Jose Aldo. Connor knocked him out. He didn't beat him up for 5 rounds. And Amanda did not beat the shit out of Chris Cyborg. She punished her, but it's because she caught her early, boom, 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 and finished the fight. I want to see him do it again. And I'm not saying that Amanda can't beat her again. I just think it was pretty quick to ordain her as the greatest of the greatest and say, well, Chris has only fought XZZ and she couldn't do that. Let them go again. They are the 2 best female fighters, the 2 most dangerous female fighters in their weight classes. But still, I'd say overall in the world right now. So let's figure it out. Coker, Dana, let's let everybody make a ton of money. And I'd love to be the guy they call to come in and do the play-by-play.
That'd be amazing. I feel like that was going to happen after the first fight. I thought it only made sense for that to get run back.
Well, and the problem is, Justin, is you guys both know that Chris was never treated the way that she felt that she would be treated. I think that's the nice way to say it. And she wasn't all that happy during her time at the UFC. And I suppose from Dana's perspective, the UFC wasn't all that thrilled with Chris because she couldn't make this weight, couldn't do that, couldn't. And she had an opportunity to go back to someone that she had worked for before, someone who was going to love and adore her like she has earned. And she took it. And she went to Bellator to once again work for Scott Coker because she was at Strikeforce. So I don't think I can definitely tell you it wasn't Chris running away from a rematch with Amanda. It was the end of Chris's contract. And to get that fight, she would have to stay for at least one more. And I got news for you. If she would have stayed for that rematch, there's no way that the UFC would have signed her to a 1-fight deal. Because maybe they would have. And then they could have said, all right, she beat you twice, bye-bye. But there's a clause in championship fights that if it's the last fight on your deal, but you are the champion, there's an automatic renewal of a couple of fights.
Right.
And so Chris lost. And then she said, all right, this sucks, but I'm going to go and take my work somewhere else. If she would have won, there would have been a rematch because she would have still been under contract.
Yeah. So, Mike, that kind of leads me to my next question. As you mentioned with the champions clause and, if they win, they get more fights. Right. Do you think that will happen with Ngannou, given everything that's going on? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, here's what I've seen in the past. And here is what I've witnessed in the past is that at the very least, he won't be fighting in competing in another mixed martial arts organization. The UFC owns those rights. Now, if Francis were to go and want to box, would Dana, and I don't want to just say Dana because I'm not bashing Dana. Dana's the boss over there. He was my boss for 15 years. But would Dana say, okay, go do that, make some money, stop whining about what you're making here. I'll help promote you in this boxing endeavor like they did with Connor.
Right.
Go make a ton of money, then come back though to us and defend your belt. So let's do a win-win here. Or would it be more of a GSP situation where GSP was supposed to have the opportunity to fight De La Hoya, to box De La Hoya, but technically GSP's rights are still owned by the UFC. And it's not just MMA, it's all combat sports. So really, I would say it's going to be up to the collective group, led by Dana, led by the ownership of the UFC, and then of Francis. But, the thing that could solve it all, Justin and Corey, or make it a little more amicable, if you will, is to let him go the Connor route and support him, be his promoter, help him make millions and millions and millions of dollars. And then, okay, what are they arguing over? They're arguing over $1 million. I don't know what Francis wants from the UFC and what the UFC doesn't want to give him. But if he goes out and let's just say makes 40 million, I mean, obviously Connor made 80 or 90. It was ridiculous. But even if he makes 20 million, well, that takes pressure off of everybody, doesn't it? And then Francis can come back and he could say, all right, I boxed and perhaps he beat somebody and I'm going to go defend this title and see what happens from there. I think that would be the way to solve it. But technically it's really in the hands of the UFC with him being the champion.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that route 100%.
Yeah. I mean, why not? I mean, obviously, we know Dana's personality very well. My mom's full Irish as well. So I know where Dana's blood comes from. And you could push him. And then if it gets too far, it's the phrase he used with Tito a decade and a half ago, scorched earth. You become scorched earth. Now, I don't think Francis is scorched earth in the eyes of the UFC or Dana, but there's some plants on his lawn that need some fertilizing.
Oh, yeah.
And hopefully they'll be able to find some fertilizer and make that happen. Because he's a beast and he's the first big guy to rule the heavyweight division in a while, because we had the big dudes and then we had the hybrids for a long time, the 240s, the Stipes and DC and everybody around 240, Cain Velasquez, though the Junior Dos Santos was about 240. Now we got the big cutting weight to get to 265 heavyweight. And everybody in the world wants to watch people like that.
Oh,
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I have a question of the heavyweight division, and always a hot topic on and on in the cage, John Jones. Do you think he will be back? And if he fights Ngannou, who would you take in that fight?
Wow. I'm a John Jones fan. There's a lot of things that I just don't understand. Like I think a lot of us don't understand. My experiences with John were always first class. I have a ton of respect for him. I absolutely loved calling his fights. There's been no more dominant fighter that I have been able to watch than John. Anderson obviously was right there. George had his run, BJ. But when you talk about up until that Gustafsson fight, which by the way, I said in Sweden about a year and a half before that Alexander Gustafsson, the Mauler, would be the first real challenge. And people blasted me on social media. You're such an idiot. And I said, it's size. He's 6'5". Jones is 6'4". Somebody's going to finally get to be able to reach John. And that was a hell of a fight. And John's been tested since. John Jones can fight at heavyweight, no question. He's long enough, both in his normal height, but his reach. I don't know. Now, if you told me he was going against one of those hybrids, I'd probably be Jones but this is a different kind of beast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody is going to beat Francis for a long time, especially we saw how much he's evolved and we're all going, that was another freaking takedown. He's like winning this fight on the ground. What is going on here?
Yeah.
So that's the crazy part of it, Corey, that makes me wonder, but I want to see John Jones again. And I think heavyweight makes a lot of sense for John. What is left to accomplish at 205 with respect to everybody at 205. So let's try something different.
Yeah.
John Jones, we were in Columbus, Ohio. John was getting ready to fight. And we happened to be on the same floor in the hotel. And Bones comes up to me, he goes, Goldie, will you do me a favor tonight or tomorrow, whenever it was? And I'm like, yeah, of course, John. He goes, could you talk about Mike Winklejohn a little bit during my fight? And of course, we're all fans of both Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn, but you always seem to go, the wizard, Greg Jackson. We know how great Winklejohn was, not only as a coach, but as a competitor. And I was like, of course. He's like, my striking has evolved. My striking is what it is because of Mike Winklejohn. And that's my John Jones. You have these little moments in life with certain people. And John came up to me and asked me to recognize his striking coach. And he was very specific about saying, could you tell the world that I say, thank you, Wink, for everything you've done to me? It's hard for me to forget that kind of moment and that class move on John's part, wanting to recognize everyone who has helped him get to where he was at that point. And especially one of the main guys who, in all reality, Justin and Corey, wasn't getting mentioned and wasn't being given credit enough. Duke Rufus is a guy that's really said, Coach Cush, Coach Cush, Coach Cush. Scott Cushman has really gotten a lot of credit, and that's because Duke's ego is in check. Yeah. Duke's a K1 world champion, but Duke's ego is in check, and he gives Scott Cushman a lot of credit a lot of times. And any good head coach surrounds themselves with great assistant coaches, and they let their assistant coaches do their jobs properly, and they put their ego aside. Why does every offensive and defensive coordinator in the NFL of a very successful team interview for 9 head coaching jobs after a few years of being a coordinator on a very successful team?
Yep.
So another question that I had is, and this also plays into the nostalgia aspect you were talking about earlier. If you had to pick, and I know this is a very general question, but what would be your favorite fight that you ever called?
You're right. If I had to pick, because there's so many, and a lot of it, would also have to do with the venues. And were we on Fox for the first time? Junior and Kane, I had worked for Fox Sports Net. I had worked for Fox. I had done sidelines. But man, I was ready. That first show was one fight, and we were ready, man. Heavyweight. Da-da-dun, 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 da-da-dun. Our tail of the tape for this heavyweight championship fight. And 1 minute and 2 seconds later, it was like, back to you, Kurt. and I tease Junior about it all the time. Like, dude, I actually saw him at the PFL finals a couple months ago. And at the JDS, he's like, sorry, I love the guy. So that was one I was excited about. The special one for me was Anderson and Vitor, because I had seen them both come up and dominate. I was surprised how quickly it ended and how it ended. But then again, why should I be that surprised? That was one that I was really excited about calling. The bad blood between Rampage and Rashad on The Ultimate Fighter.
That was a good one.
Yeah.
That entire, don't say that to me. Don't say that to me. And that whole season of breaking doors and shit. That was a matchup that I truly, truly enjoyed. Watching Ronda Rousey walk in for the very first time and almost being choked out by Liz Carmouche just riding her back. And I'm thinking, this hype train is going down right now.
Yeah.
And then boom, Ronda was able to figure it out and get things going. And then enter Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
Enter Conor McGregor. And he brought an entire Emerald Isle with him. I swear, guys, we would be at weigh-ins and they'd be singing. And I'm like, are we at the MGM or are we in Dublin right now? Like, we should all just drink a fucking Guinness and shoot some jammies.
Yeah.
Like, it was incredible, the excitement that he brought to the arena. So those are some of the highlights. You know, there's no question. Watching John do what he did over the years was special. Hendo and Bisping was special because of the buildup on that one. Maybe the greatest finish that I was able to call was UFC 199 when Michael Bisping knocked out Luke Rockhold.
Yep.
That's the famous picture of Joe and I like that. And I didn't doubt that Michael could do it, but it was just such a great story that of all the people who had fought for a title, it was UFC fight number 27 for the season 3 Ultimate Fighter winner, Michael the Count Bisping. And he steps in on short notice and he knocks out Luke Rockhold, and Jason Perillo, my buddy, his striking coach, just goes, it was awesome. It was awesome. And I had Holly having the edge in Melbourne, Australia, going into that fight. And Joe always teased me like, what do you mean? Like, it takes a lot of energy to be a rock star. Here's what I meant. Ronda Rousey was supposed to fight Holly Holm 3 months later than when they fought in Melbourne, Australia. Robbie Lawler was supposed to be the headliner in that card. It was supposed to be a title fight with the Ruthless one. He got hurt. Ronda said, all right, I'll do it. I'll go early. Let's go. Ronda had done every single interview. She had signed every autograph. She was making the most of her opportunities in life because they don't always come at the pace that they were coming for Ronda. Did she still train? Of course. Did she still eat properly? Of course. But were there a lot of things that she was saying yes to that maybe she could have shut down a little more instead of all of a sudden having a 90-day date change? And then all of a sudden she's facing a way different opponent than she had faced previously. That's what I meant about being a rock star. Every person wanted to touch her. Yep. Every movie wanted her to be part of it. Every commercial endorsement took a day away or a few hours away to go shoot that commercial. But if you're Ronda, what do? You go boom, boom, boom. You fill the piggy bank because it's hot right now. And would it have been different if it were 3 months later? I don't know. Holly's greatest quote was, she's never been punched hard enough to know she was in a fight. And Holly caught her. And Ronda, instead of hands up, chin down, went hands down, chin up, and went in a rage. And that just made it easier for Holly from there. That one was still, though, to see a dominant champ like that be defeated, that one was pretty crazy. And I take my phrase, there is no such thing as a lucky punch. There's a fortunate landing from Matt Natara Sarah, George St. Pierre.
Matt Sarah.
I was swinging. I was trying to knock him out, and I did. Is that lucky? I don't know. You were trying to knock him out. So I guess, Matt, that wasn't lucky. Was I fortunate I knocked him out? I would say that, yeah, it worked out pretty well. So that was pretty crazy. That was pretty crazy.
Going back to like the events, I've been, I think, to about maybe 8 UFC fights. The first one I ever saw was in Las Vegas. Main event was Tito Ortiz versus Vitor.
Yeah.
My favorite one, though, is Randy Couture versus Tim Sylvia in Columbus. I know what I felt like in the audience. Mm-hmm. Was it like, with the crowd, like, do you guys feel that? Like,
absolutely 100%. Where are you guys from?
We're from Pennsylvania.
Okay. All right. Well, Who Day. Yeah. Right here, baby. Who Day. God, I love Mighty Mac. I was born in Cincinnati, raised in Cleveland. I'm a Buckeye. And that was the first UFC in my home state. So first and foremost, I was super pumped up because there was a UFC in Ohio and all my family and friends were able to be there. And it was a homecoming for me in this cool gig that I had enjoyed for many years. My first UFC was Ultimate Japan. And back in 1997, Randy Couture beat Maurice Smith to become the UFC heavyweight champion. My 100th UFC later was Randy and Brock. Even though it was UFC 91, put in the Spike shows and that, Randy Couture again. And even though I lost to Brock, he came to the party that the peeps threw for me for my 100th. I love Randy Couture. That was such an amazing moment because no one thought that Randy could still do it. Not just age, this and that. That wasn't so much it, but it was that Tim had been, to me, I thought Tim was going to lose to Andre. And I thought Tim was going to lose to Andre again. And he beat Arlovsky twice. And I'm like, holy shit. Like, all right, so what's Randy going to do? And if you guys remember on the actual broadcast, now on the replay, it's not there. When Randy came out and smoked him, I was doing the freaking clock promo. Tonight's clock is brought to you by Throwing the Leather Podcast. And, I'm like, okay. And obviously that changed the entire spectrum of the fight. But the way the crowd was, much to your point, Corey, I'm a hockey guy. At the end, they were counting down.
Yes.
10, 9, 8. And I always joke with my old boss, George Greenberg at Fox. I go, I just wanted to say, you don't believe in miracles. and George always says, well, it's probably a good thing you didn't.
Yeah.
I would agree with you that I got chills right now thinking of it. That was a very, very special moment for a lot of reasons. A very dear friend doing what he did, the way he did it in my home state and the way the crowd embraced it. I mean, that's a wrestling state too. Don't forget that. Yeah. And there's nothing they didn't love about Tim. They just adored Randy. Yeah. And he's the natural. He's Captain America. Yeah. That man is my hero.
A funny quick story. We were in the upper deck, first row. I think there was 5 of us. So, you know, we traveled pretty much everywhere. We went to Cincinnati for the fight.
Yeah.
Drove straight out. Drove right back after the fight, 9 hours. So at the Columbus fight, I think my brother may have had a little too much to drink, but when Randy hit Tim, it just erupted. And we're jumping around, and I look over, and my brother's sleeping.
Come on.
And I'm like, I couldn't believe it, but he was like just out. I was like, how do you sleep?
The worst time.
Wow.
Just the crowd itself was so loud. And
that's funny.
I was like, how? I don't know. But still to this day, he's like, oh, I wasn't sleeping. But
yeah, well, you definitely weren't a Randy Couture fan then, or you weren't paying attention to something.
Yeah.
That's funny. There have been people who have had too many adult beverages at UFCs and not made it. My uncle years ago, we had a show in Tampa, and the women were the co-main event. I can't remember who it was. And then the main event was good. It was 2 champions or something. And I asked my uncle about, hey, did you enjoy the show? I didn't see it after. He goes, well, we left after the co-main event. We left after the women's fight. And I'm like, Uncle Donnie, like, what? You wouldn't stay for the main event? Goes, no, those ladies bring it more than those guys ever will. I came to watch the ladies inside there tear into each other. I was happy and I went home. And I'm like, it makes sense, doesn't make sense. Like Ted Lasso, Wales in the UK, yes and no, you know? But I've seen examples of that before, but that's kind of funny with your brother. And obviously Cincinnati was very special for me, even more so because I went to Miami of Ohio. My mom and dad were born and raised in Cincinnati. I'm a huge Reds fan. I'm a huge Bengals fan. I can't say I've ever loved the Steelers because I'll never even like that school up north. Yeah. But having Big Ben there from my college was like, I'd rather have them have success than the Browns, the Ravens, or anybody else if it's going to be someone in our division. So I was okay with Big Ben, just for the record with you guys. But Cincinnati, when Rich came out in his orange and black.
Yeah.
Welcome to the jungle.
It was,
I mean, it was fucking Bengals heaven.
it was crazy.
And then you asked me why that guy is my all-time favorite. You know that Anderson was apologizing to Rich after that fight for the punishment he put upon him in his hometown. He was apologizing. Wow. And Rich, of course, is like, dude, but that was Anderson's first thought. I had to do my job, and I had to do my job, and I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry that but that's the class that we have in our sport. Yeah. And it's not just Anderson. I think of Lyoto all the time. I can name a bunch of men and women who have that same mentality, but Anderson's first thing was to go, yes. And second thing was to go check on Rich and put his arm around him and apologize for what had just happened in front of his hometown fans. Pretty classy move. And Rich is my buddy, being a fellow Buckeye.
Yeah. Doesn't get much classier than that.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. And I need to text George Gurgel. It's his birthday today.
So that leads me into another question. We're talking about, classiest fighters in UFC history. So who would you think would be one of the best trash talkers? Because, talking about Anderson, it makes me think of his rivalry with Chael Sonnen.
Oh, man.
So
Chael is the most creative.
Yeah.
That man is a verbal genius. He is a verbal genius. The shit that he came up with over the years.
My God.
I mean, it's the GOAT against Fedor. But his rhymes and his whole ordeals that he would go, he's definitely the most creative of all time. Yeah. And I've always said the most successful financially fighter with about an 80% win percentage, because he was able to get under people's skin. Yeah. The documentary on Anderson, Like Water, which has a lot of the buildup to the Chael fight, the first one in Oakland. If you guys haven't seen it, check it out. It's really good. But there's a point where he's going off about something, and Ed Soros is in another room because they're doing a teleconference, and he puts it on mute. And Ed's is like, this dude is whack. This dude is he's insane. And he gets back on, and he's had great lines over the years. When you bow in Brazil, they don't bow back. They hit you in the head, take your wallet. That's not the most inaccurate statement. And I'm married to a Brazilian now, so I can say that with the respect that it comes with. So the trash talk there was incredible. Yeah. Tito wore the black hat as well as anybody in combat history, because back in the day, you either watched so you could cheer for the Huntington Beach bad boy, or you watched with the hope of him getting his ass kicked. Yeah. You know what you did? You paid your $59.95 and you pressed that red button and you watched. Yeah. So Tito was obviously great at it. Rampage and Rashad were pretty darn good together. And then there's Conor. Conor's whole, I don't even know if it's an act. It's just Conor being Conor, as we found out. These more things in real life that have happened or not happened with Conor. You go, wow, he's the same guy outside of it. Conor was brilliant at it. There were a couple times where I was like, will this fucking guy shut up? They had that press conference. Remember, they're 10 champions.
Yeah.
And Conor wouldn't let anybody else talk. Who the fuck are you anyway? Yeah. Fucking here to see me. I'm not here to take on. I'm not here to take on. What was it? I'm not here to do. I'm here to take over. I'm not here to take part. I'm here to take over. Don't talk to this fucking guy. You want to fucking money fight? Come to me. So, Conor is right up there. Conor is right up there with him. Rampage was pretty darn good at it.
Yeah.
In a quiet way, Josh Koscheck would get under people's skin. He just had that kind of squirrely, I'm going to mess with you. And so those would be the best. Chael's definitely he is the true red belt of wit. when it comes to trash talk in selling a fight. And storylines sell fights. And dislike is a great thing in this business. But respect and class is a better thing when the fight is over. And with the exception of this last fight against Dustin Poirier, if you go back and watch Conor's losses, he took each one as a martial artist, as a true man, and as a champion, regardless of the buildup. This one, not so much. Maybe it was the injury and that, Dustin, blah, blah, blah. But that's the one thing that I always, liked about Conor as well, is that Conor could get away with that. And I mean, the Diaz brothers, they don't even have to say anything. No, that's the beauty of it. I mean, Nick and Nate don't even have to say anything. Nick says to me one time, they're building up for one of his big fights. And they always do the countdown shows, right? He goes, Goldie, he goes, every time they do a countdown on me, they go to Stockton, they go to the ghetto, they go to all the graffiti. He goes, I haven't lived there in 10 years. I have a really nice house now. And I'm like, oh, fuck that. It was awesome. It was awesome. And Nick was funny. He's like, I don't even live there anymore, but they got to go there. That's got to be the story. So those would be the ones that really hit me. Nobody more creative than Chael. Nobody could take over a room better than Conor, and a couple in between. I remember, I'll tell you a quick story about Frank Trigg. Frank Trigg was a guy that I had not met. He was getting set to fight Matt Hughes for the first time. And twinkle toes. I mean, if you remember that buildup, Frank was a dick. I mean, he was an arrogant person. Every interview, he was a jackass. And so I kind of was like, my first impression without knowing the guy was like, okay, this guy's like, okay, he's on this side of the list, and I don't have many on this side of the list. So months go by. I was actually the voice of the Minnesota Wild at that time as well. And we had a guy on our team named Steve McKenna. Mac was a fighter, and a good hockey player, because it's not just fighters in these days, but Mac was able to use his hands pretty well. We're in Vegas a couple months later for UFC. Frank's not on the card. And late night, and I had a couple of drinks, Corey, like your brother, but I wasn't asleep. And I see McKenna with Trigg. And I go to Mac. I go, Mac and I hung out a lot in Minnesota. And I said, Mac, why are you with this dude? Like, this guy's an asshole. Like, why are you hanging with him? He's like, Goldie, he's not an asshole. He's one of us. Like, no, he's not. And I met Frank and had a drink with him. And he said, can I ask you something? I said, of course. He goes, how exciting of a person behind the microphone is Matt Hughes? And I went, gotcha. It's like somebody had to put a little something into the fight, and Matt wasn't going to be the guy to do it. And as it turns out, modern day, Frank and I are extremely close. We've worked together. We've been buddies for 20 years. And I know the real Frank, but yeah, he turned it on because he knew that the champion was just not someone who was going to get you excited about the matchup. And Frank wanted to get you excited for those fights. And he definitely had me fooled. Yeah,
I have to be honest, I thought the same thing.
Yeah,
like,
you remember, right?
When I looking back at the fight now, I'm like, that's all, like, we're like, oh man, I hope he just crushes him. Like,
yeah.
But I mean, you don't get to meet these guys. You don't see, the real personalities, but you do get to see them hyping a fight. And that's what a lot of people think, or be like, oh, he's just an asshole, but he's just trying to hype the fight.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure. And, much to both your points, and Justin, this as well. Like I said, storylines are what get us even more excited about great fights. Yes. And if there's a back and forth and, going to the families and the girlfriends and stuff, come on, be more creative than that. Chael's never had to go there. Let's be more creative than being classless in some of it. But it's entertaining as hell. And it makes you say, like I said very often, as they stepped in and we got ready to fight, the wait is finally over. Because this buildup was about to come to a confrontation, and someone was going to win and someone was going to lose. But much to my point about Tito, sounds, Corey, like you had a little bit more rooting interest for Matt Hughes, Frank Trigg than you would have thought you might have for Matt Hughes and Frank Trigg, who didn't say much in the build up to the fight.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I went into that. It was kind of the same way with Tito. The like I said, the first one I saw was Tito Vitor.
Yeah.
And so my friends were telling me, like, you know, Tito, like how he does, you know, does stuff. And I instantly, I was like, oh, I'm a Vitor fan. Like,
Yeah. Tito's stuff with the Lions Den and the t-shirts and pissing Ken off. And that kind of string of fights was where Tito's hat was the darkest of any time. And he was going against another badass place in the Lions Den. So neither team wanted to wear the white hat. Nobody wanted to be the good guy there. But Tito really got a lot of emotion even before he fought Ken and got a lot more buys because of it. And what's your point? You either watch from the win or you watch from the lose.
Exactly.
There were millions of people who thought that it was a genius move when Randy Couture smacked Tito's butt. He's like, okay, see, that boy team punishment just got punished. His daddy just gave him a whipping.
Yeah.
And so yeah, Tito is always going to be one that makes you want to watch one way or another. And that's what it's about. I mean, rivalries in any type of sport. I have friends who are fans of that school up north, and I'm getting freaking texts this year. And you're like, oh, yeah, hail to the victors. I'm like, fuck, dude, it's like the second time you beat us in 20 years. Like, have a little teaspoon and shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like, but it is Woody and Bo, so it's always going to be that way, which is pretty awesome. That's what makes things like that, as you guys know, so special. That's what it's about.
I would say, like, if you dislike the person, like, going into the fight, they're doing their job.
Yeah. I mean, even the Dominic Cruz, Uriah Faber stuff. I mean, the way that Dom did it. I mean, that a little bit of a not so class move. But man, I'll tell you what, Uriah is not going to say stuff like that. Uriah is going to get you excited because he's a bubbly personality. So Dom said, all right, I'll be the other end of the spectrum. And what was already on paper a spectacular matchup became a must-see because of the buildup and Uriah actually getting pissed off before a fight for one of the first times, maybe the first real time in his fighting career where he really had a dislike going into a fight. And it made it even that much more interesting as we got closer and closer to it.
So, Goldie, you were talking about a storyline selling a fight and about Rampage and Rashad and, you know, the doors on the Ultimate Fighter. That brings me back to Chael and Vanderlei on the Ultimate Fighter. When all Chael wanted to do was know the date. That's all he wanted.
Classic.
Yeah, he's running out the back door and he's this and he's that. And Chael did a nice job with Vanderlei, and Vanderlei is a cool dude. I mean, he's the axe murderer. Don't get me wrong. But I've had great experiences with Vanderlei as well. I always like, like, Mike, I thank you for everything you would say nice about me. And I don't know why I just made Vanderlei French Canadian like Chris Pang, but you know, we'll move on. Chael did a great job with that. What bit Chael in the backside was, you know, when other subjects came up that made it not a pure athletic competition. You see me saying things nicely here. Yeah. And then Chael had the same thing happen after the lab came a calling. It kind of ruined all the things that he wanted to say about Vanderlei for a long, long time. But yeah, was it funny when he was doing it? Was he trying to get himself a fight? No question. And he was trying to get himself a fight that was going to get a lot of buys because a pissed off Vanderlei, even a not pissed off Vanderlei, is a must see for me.
Oh God.
There were certain guys who I get excited, truly excited about every time they would make that walk. And Vanderlei Silva is one of those fighters because you knew something crazy was probably going to happen. Quentin Rampage Jackson, that dude coming in, you knew there was that Mr. T whoosh, and somebody could get their ass knocked out.
And
I always had chills. It could be, a non-title fight. It didn't matter.
Mhm.
It didn't matter. And then Anderson for a different reason, because you didn't know what form of the Matrix you were going to see.
Yeah.
But as far as just that pure, like, holy shit, this is going to be, like Joe would say, this is going to be crazy. Vanderlei is one, and Rampage. And I will also tell you, Chris Cyborg, in my mind, is one of those fighters where you go, man, something special and something violent could happen right now. Vitor, the same. Vitor back in his prime with those hands. Same. I remember Sao Paulo and him destroying Vanderlei like it was yesterday. I mean, that was like the Rocky movie. Those hands were just
he just went across the cage at him.
Yep. Blitzed him.
I like, for people who don't watch UFC or who are new to it, excuse me, that's one of the first fights I show them.
That's a good one to show.
And Vitor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he was so fast.
Yep. I'd still say top 5 fastest set of hands in UFC history.
Oh, yeah.
Top 5 for sure. I mean, not taking him today. He's still pretty fast today, but when you talk about the phenom, those hands were as fast as any in the game at that time. Anderson was different in the way he did things. Shogun was different in the way he did. I'm going with, kind of the Brazilian feel here. Lyoto was different. They were all magical in their own way, but the phenom and that hand speed, that was crazy. And so when people were asking me, go back to the first thing we were talking about, Justin, Corey, people were asking me about making the transition. You know what I told them, Corey? Go watch Vitor Belfort, Vanderlei Silva, Sao Paulo, Brazil, and tell me if he doesn't have some hands. Will that make him a great boxer? I don't know, but tell me that he's not a striker first, and I will tell you that you are very wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you were talking about boxing and some of the bare knuckle fights. What are your some of your upcoming endeavors?
So this week, I just got a call to go do a card with Fight Stars TV. And what they have is they have a partnership with promotions in Mexico. We go into a studio and we call the fights kind of off the monitor, but obviously it's the English broadcast. So the owner has the English rights to these cards. I was looking at the card, Justin and Corey. There's 10 rounders, 8 rounders, which is in boxing means there's been some achievements because you start out a 4-rounder, then 6. And I mean, there's a kid who's 9-0-1 with 7 knockouts in the main event against a guy who's 14-1-1. Still got to work on their nicknames. I got to, my wife speaks Portuguese, but she can help me. So I say Chito or Chita, or, don't mess it up. So I'm excited for that. And I am also the voice of ProBox TV, which is going to make its debut next month. We were supposed to have a show on the 21st of January, but it got pushed back for COVID. Now, ProBox has managed boxers for quite some time and put on some shows in the past. And they have a studio set up in Plant City outside of Tampa. And I'm going to be the guy. I'm going to be the play-by-play guy. And so I will tell you this. Paulie Malignaggi is my partner on BYB Extreme. And we've done a couple shows together. Instant chemistry. Like the old days with Joe. Kind of crazy, kind of renegade. Paulie's got a little higher voice, but when they get on a roll, I just sit back and I just become like you guys. I just become a fan. Paulie's a loyal dude too. And we have built a bond very, very quickly because we truly enjoy working together. So when ProBox was like, who should we look at? Because Paulie had done stuff with them for a long time. They said, well, how about Mike Goldberg? And the owner's like, we could get Goldie? And I'm very blessed to be doing that. So with ProBox, the team is Paulie Malignaggi, Antonio Tarver, Roy Jones Jr., and me. Like,
That's a great team.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I'm being, obviously very humble and gracious, honestly being so with those, great boxers. And obviously Paulie, not just boxing, but, he's as good as anybody out there on the mic as a boxing analyst and entertaining as well. our executive producer said, it's like a Marvel movie. I go, well, I'm Ant-Man, but I'm in the movie. He's like, all right, Ant-Man, but I'm in the movie. And so I'm really honored to be working with that group. And then Paulie is my partner on the other one that I will do on Friday night. That'll be my first one. And, you know, BYB Extreme. Paulie, Benny Ricardo works with us. Al Bernstein and Claudia Trejos, obviously huge boxing backgrounds. Two of the most respected voices in the sport of boxing. Claudia has done more of her work on the Spanish side. She's from Colombia, but she's covered every big fight. And Al Bernstein, there's nothing else to say. And so with BYB Extreme, when you look at us trying to build a product and a promotion, and we have the Trigon, which makes us special, the fact that a network broadcast team has been put in place is pretty cool. And I really humbly believe that Paulie and I can become the new dynamic duo. He was at Showtime for a long time. Showtime ended up being a bad move by Bellator for me because Moro was already there. But we're meeting at a place where we're both extremely passionate. We like working with each other. Paulie's old school Sicilian. He's loyal as can be, and he's already shown me that. And every time he's, Goldie, your work speaks for itself. And I love working with you. Yeah. So honestly, I'm not going to go in and act like I've become a boxing expert at all, Justin and Corey. But what I will do is what I always do with every sport. I'll study my ass off. I'll know everything I can learn on these fighters, and I'll let Paulie run the show because that's what good people do. That's what Pat Summerall did with John Madden. And let's remember, Pat played the game. Yeah. Pat was in the NFL. Yet he would always say, boom, there's John Madden, do your thing. And that's what I did with Joe. So I'm going to be, Paulie stuck with me. We're going to be spending a lot of time together, but just everything, just, you know, the size and the facial expressions. And Joe said on his podcast how much he respects Paulie's work in the past as well. So a lot of boxing, some with gloves, some without, and hopefully some other fun ventures along the way.
That's awesome. That's cool. That's awesome to hear. It really is.
Yeah. I'm excited. I wouldn't say reinvigorated. And if I were still doing the UFC, would I be sad? No, you know, I was a victim of $170 million interest payment on a $4.2 billion purchase. I was one of 130 people, or at least 130 who were let go when, you know, there was the takeover. If Zuffa's still there, you know, it could be a different time in my life. But I will tell you, with BYB Extreme, I feel like I can go on a journey again. And as I look back at it, that was like Columbus, like you brought up, Corey, and Justin, the fights that I was sharing with you. That part was the coolest part, the unknown. Not that the big shows weren't awesome, but I think back to like saying to Joe all the time, like, damn, this ain't Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. We're not a Casino Magic anymore. You know, this is an 80,000 at Sky Dome going, what the? So I'm very excited about the journey that I hope to help BYB Extreme go on as Bare Knuckle takes over. I want our organization to be the one that does so, and with a new venture into boxing. And I've called combat sports for 25 years. And again, I will do my due diligence and I will learn as I go along, but I will go in there with humbleness and respect. Very much like Anderson talked about, you know, boxing in Mexico. I'm going into a different world. I have experience. I can call fights, but I'm not going to walk in through the door like I'm freaking Superman and, you know, I'm the UFC guy, you know, I'm Goldie, you know, No, I'm going to go in there as you should in any new locker room and be a guest, and hopefully have a lot of bosses fall in love with my work real quickly.
They definitely will.
There's no reason not.
Thank you very much. Thanks, you guys.
It really does speak for itself. It really does.
Thank you. Now that everything on Instagram and Facebook, social media stuff, you can go and.
Yep. Goldie on TV is my Twitter, and I don't want to say my fan page, but my second page on Facebook kind of went away. But anything that's something going on is Goldie on TV on both Twitter And on Instagram, I got to get better at doing stuff. I try to post freaking stories and it won't do this, it won't do that. And I'm like, this just took fucking 45 minutes, put 30 seconds of video on. But yes, IG, Goldie on TV, Twitter, Goldie on TV, and check it out. Fight Stars TV, Pro Box TV. We're going to be pretty much a 24-hour channel. And BYB Extreme coming your way in March from Tampa. And it'll be on our BYB Extreme Fighting Series YouTube channel. So Paulie and I, the Magic Man, Goldie and the Magic Man, coming to you live inside the Trigon.
That's going to be awesome.
I can't wait to check that out. You have me real excited for that now.
Yeah.
Than's you. Yeah.
The whole Trigon's different, obviously, than
a little bit smaller, a little bit different sport, but the same type of competitors that I've witnessed and been honored to be around for over 2 decades. People who go in there and bring it, and people who walk out and shake hands.
Absolutely. And that's what you love about the sport. Like you said, all the respect between opponents. It's what makes the sport, be it, boxing or MMA, really special.
No question about it. No question about it. It's been fun, you guys, throwing the leather with you too.
Absolutely. Listen, Goldie, it's been an honor to have you on. It really has.
Thank you. Thank you. And Justin, you are a very pleasantly polite, persistent person. Like once I said, like Corey, Justin he wasn't letting me off the hook. He's like, I want to do it now. So I love this. I love talking to the real fans like you two. And my wife always teases me that she wants me to go salt and pepper. So I got a show on Friday. So I'm going to go get rid of a little salt, maybe, maybe allegedly, and get ready to get back on camera on Friday night. So thank you for your time. And Sunday, baby, who they think gonna beat them Bengals?
Not the Chiefs.
Fuck, I hope not. We already beat them once. Because I play for the team now. But we did, Joe Burrow has proven that he can put up points against that defense. And that Buffalo Kansas City game was insane. Now Patrick Mahomes is getting into Patrick Mahomes form. So it's scary. It's either way, it was going to be the matchup for whoever got to it. Everybody figures the team going to the Super Bowl was the team that won on Sunday, Kansas City or Buffalo. I'd like to see the Bengals go spoil the party.
Hey, I'd love to see the Bengals there. I had an old teacher in high school, big Bengals fan. So
yeah. Super Bowl 23, Joe Robbie Stadium, 1989 was the last time, the Icky Shuffle. So
fingers crossed.
Let's go, Joe Burrow. Yep. That's it.
Well, Goldie, thank you again. It's been an honor
to
talk with you.
Thank you so much.
It.
We appreciate it.
My pleasure, you guys. Continued success with the podcast, and hit me up later. Send me some links. I'll post them, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you.
See you guys.
Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye.